Alright, this is going to be a quick breakdown of holograms, how they work, and why they suck. We're going to start off by actually looking at the object, the IFF file. Make tangible hologram. So we're going to look first at the space battle hologram. This is the actual base of the hologram. This is what everything is attached to. You have the normal appearance file. So here we have furniture, hologram display base. And then the actual holographic image and everything else is attached via client data file. This client data file is what includes the holographic image, which would be, say, like Boba Fett or something like that, a glow that appears above the base of the hologram, and then the light that is emitted from the hologram itself. The client data file, pull this up. Let's use one of the anniversary ones I made. This first is the glow. The glow looks like this. So this is kind of what the glow looks like. So you have the glow, then you have the actual holographic image, then you have the light that is emitted. Looking back at the two child objects, you have some basic numbers you can change. I pretty much leave them alone. The only thing that I change here is for the actual appearance file, and that is this moves the object up 0.2 meters on the y-axis. So it gives it, make sure it isn't inside the actual hologram base. It's kind of floating above it. Everything else you could fool around with and break stuff if you feel like it. The light object, this is the actual color and properties of the light that is emitted from the hologram. All the RGB colors here, so this is orange. It's set in negative values. You could maybe try positive, I don't know. It was like this and I just tweaked it until it worked. Open up in Photoshop, choose some colors, and then get the negative values and put them in here. I assume it's 0 through 255 or 0.255 or 256. I'm not sure which one it maxes out at. This will allow you to give a glow to your holograms. So with all this, might ask, how do you actually make things look like a hologram? Otherwise, you're just going to have what looks like a toy of Boba Fett floating above a holographic image. The first thing you gotta look at is the shader. So obviously everything's still the same, where you have your object, then you have your appearance, then that links into an LOD file, then that links into a mesh, and then those mesh go into a shader. So the shader, let's see what pops up when I do this. Look at Boba Fett. So the shader, this is a copy of another hologram, and I've just been changing everything. You can see here, here's the normal texture, but down here is where it gets a little different. You have the palettes. There's a couple other things that go on in here, such as this. This is like membrane color. This is pretty much what kind of gives you that hologram effect. Just copy a shader from a different hologram. That's the best starting point. And then from there, this is where you can actually choose the color of the hologram. Now, while it should be easy, it's not, because we don't have access to the Asset Customization Manager. If we did, then when we created a new object, we would be able to just choose an index and we could set the color that way. But because we can't, we have to do a couple little hacky things. So you'll see here palette, and then I have hologram orange anniversary .pal. You will have to make your own custom palette every single time you make a new color. Here, if we take a look, I have a green one. Let's see, where's just a regular holo? Just a regular one. Okay, so you can see that there's all these colors on the hologram from the basic hologram palette, but we have access to none of these on new holograms. If we changed that index number, I assume it's, oh, we changed the palette ID here on any of the existing holograms, they would switch to these colors. But on new ones, since we can't and it just defaults to the first value, the cheaty hacky way of doing it is just make a new palette and then only put one, and it's going to default to whatever color that is. If I go to the palette for the anniversary holograms that I made, you can see it's orange, and that's what will give you this orange hologram. So the palette ends up being a part of the appearance, the shader for the holographic image that appears above the base, and for the glow that is emitted from the base itself. Oops, not grow. This. So this gets changed by a shader and the palette, and so does the appearance. So what that means is that anytime you make a new hologram, you have to make a new appearance, you have to make new LOD, and you have to make new mesh, new shader, and you could probably stop there, but sometimes I like to make my own textures and then just increase the contrast a bunch so it kind of looks a little bit better. It's a lot of work and it's not fun. It's pretty much double the work of making a normal object because you have to go through and make all this other stuff. And I mean, you could argue it is about the same because if you've already made a base and you're already using a base, you don't have to make a new base each time. But there's a little bit more complexity and a lot of different parts that go into it, especially at the initial setup of making the glow and the shaders and the palette and the client data. You need to go through a lot of extra little hoops in order to configure it properly. But once you do that, you can just make a template where you're extracting appearances. In my case, I was using toys because they're already really small. And that is another thing, is that your appearance files, you will have to scale these. Whether you do it in a component, which you can stick a component in here, so you can use a component instead of an appearance file and actually scale it that way to make it smaller, or you open up something like 3D Studio Max, you shrink it in that, use something else as a guide, and then export it, and then you can have a small appearance. And once you have a small appearance file, you just take it and plug it in here into the client data file, and you have a hologram. It's just tedious. Everything is really tedious with this, and it's not an enjoyable experience. Obviously, you need to then do things such as adding strings. You don't need to do it for the appearances. You just need to do it for the base object itself. Add to the CRC string table and all that other fun stuff. That really is the base of making a new hologram that's a new color. If you use an existing color, you don't have to do the palettes, but you do have to do the client data. And then you can just use existing stuff. And it's kind of sucks still. So there you go. That's holograms. I hate it. I never want to do it again, but I will.